Hello and welcome to Left, Right, Center. I'm Shaun Boyd. We start with what is likely the final debate of the presidential election, the matchup between vice presidential candidates J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. 42% of viewers polled by CBS News immediately after the debate say Vance won, 41% say Walz won, and 17% say it was a tie. Here are the highlights.
Those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy.
Healthy debate, something largely missing from politics today, but Tim Walz and J.D. Vance were more cordial than combative, saving their sharpest attacks for those at the top of the ticket.
I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not.
The debate not only civil, but substantive, addressing top issues like Iran.
When Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership.
Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure.
Topics range from foreign policy to climate policy.
What the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies.
The solution for us is to continue to move forward that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country.
The candidates also debated economic policy. Both support expanded child tax credits.
There's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that.
If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans.
Vance admits he and Trump need to win back women's trust on reproductive health care.
And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making child care more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that, and that's what real leadership is.
He insists Trump has led on health care. Walz disagrees.
He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare.
The testiest exchange came at the end of the debate.
Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
Joining me, our analysts, Republican Dick Wadhams, Democrat Mike Dino. So I hear some people calling for a Vance Walz or Walz Vance ticket. You know, Mike, VP debates usually have little, if any, impact on the presidential race. Is this any different? And if so, who benefited from it?
Well, I don't think either candidate hurt their presidential candidate.
Do no harm, right?
I don't think they did any harm. And there was such a cordial debate that, I mean, they helped themselves. And I do think that Senator Vance helped himself for the future in terms of being seen by Republicans as their future. And that was probably, from my point of view, the biggest part of the night.
I think he came across as more likable in the debate than certainly he did in his nomination speech at the RNC. So, Dick, obviously you heard January 6th. It continues to be a problem for Trump and Vance. So how much is this going to play into the vote, do you think?
Well, I mean, Trump himself continues to say the election was stolen. He's already talking about how this election is being stolen. So what Vance did probably doesn't figure that prominently in it. You know, I would say this about the polling, about the debate. I think that 42-41 thing was a reflection of the political division in the country. Yeah. Everybody went to their corners. I honestly think that Vance won a convincing victory. I don't think it's going to make that big of a deal. But I think Mike is right. He really helped himself for the future. I think he probably established himself as kind of the front runner for the 2028 Republican nomination by what he did there tonight, or that night.
Despite attaching his wagon to Trump, and if Trump loses, he still comes out looking good?
The Trump crowd will still be around, Shaun, if he loses this election.
They're not going anywhere.
And in fact, they will probably be emboldened if he loses. So, yeah, it's not going to go away.
Mike, one area where I think Walz faltered some is he was pressed on a claim that he had made about being in China for the Tiananmen Square protests, and he admitted he misspoke. There have been other statements he's had to correct or clarify. How much of a liability is this, especially, I guess, when Trump misspeaks regularly?
Well, he hasn't questioned the validity of the 2020 election. He doesn't, stand up and say that, January 6th was, a peaceful protest. And he hasn't propagated that, people are eating pets or anything. And so, but he's had his issues. The one certainly saying that he was in the Middle East while he was in the National Guard, he used throughout other campaigns. And I do think that, kind of unnerved even Democrats that he couldn't be clearer on just saying, hey, that wasn't the case.
Right.
And I need to move on from it.
Right. He still was in the military for quite a long time and can brag that service up. But
he had one other thing that got on him, too. In Minnesota during the George Floyd stuff, he claimed most of the people protesting were from outside Minnesota when most of them were from inside Minnesota. They were residents of Minnesota.
Right.
So he had to move off of that one, too.
Yeah. Dick, Vance really tried to neutralize the issue of abortion. You heard what he had to say about that. Neither he nor Trump support a federal ban, and this is just about being pro-family, not about anti-abortion. Did it work?
It was a nice try. And I think it helped him a little, but no, I don't think it really helped that much. But I did like the tone that so often I think pro-life Republicans come across as kind of vindictive and hostile to women, and I think that I liked his tone that night. It's also interesting. Melania Trump is now coming out in her new book saying she's pro-choice, which is kind of an interesting development.
Although really this issue is pretty low on voters' concerns this election, despite Roe v. Wade being overturned. Well, just 4 weeks before the election, a federal judge has unsealed an explosive legal brief regarding former President Trump's alleged scheme to overturn the 2020 election. The filing provides the most comprehensive look yet at the evidence federal prosecutors have amassed in their case, which was upended by the Supreme Court's decision finding presidents are largely immune from federal prosecution for official acts. Special counsel Jack Smith says Trump was acting as a candidate, not president, and that his actions were private, not official. Trump told News Nation the decision to unseal the brief now is election interference. So, Dick, what impact do you think this is going to have on this election?
As you know, I'm no apologist for Donald Trump, but I got to tell you, the timing of this is suspect. And I think Jack Smith should have. Well, of course, it was not him. It was the judge that released this, and we've got to make that distinction. But the judge should not have released this close to the election. I didn't like what Comey did to Hillary Clinton back in 2000, and when he released the
emails.
The emails. So I don't like this. And I'm not sure it's going to change anything because the overall case is out there, so I'm not sure it changes anything.
And do people really get into the minutia of this? I mean, you've got to read it. You got to, know, and I don't know that people follow this sort of stuff as closely when, cost of living is really top issue.
So much going on right down to, yes. And I mean, when you got a strike in California and a war in the Middle East, I mean, yes.
Right. Mike, how strong do you think the special counsel Smith's argument is that Trump was acting not as a president, so his actions are not immune from prosecution?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I do work for a law firm. I do work. I think, this is one of those Supreme Court cases that really, tries to parse it out. I mean, what was he, what capacity was he acting in?
Right.
And I think he pointed out that the music was not the pomp and circumstance music that the president's introduced with when he goes to a public event. It was some other music, and getting down to the minutiae of that to say he was more of a candidate than he was presidential. But Dick's he's pointed out Dick, the polarization of the country. I mean,
right.
The information doesn't persuade either side. The people that support Trump are like, that's a bunch of hooey, and the people that don't like him are like, well, this is just more information that proves he is a bad guy.
Right. Ahead, a former Colorado County clerk becomes the first election official to go to prison for crimes related to false claims in the 2020 presidential race. How her sentence might influence what happens after November's election. Welcome back to Left, Right, Center. Former Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters will spend 9 years behind bars for tampering with Colorado voting machines. Peters is the first election official to be charged with a security breach amid false claims regarding the 2020 presidential race. Spencer Wilson is your reporter in the mountains. He was in the courtroom when the sentence was handed down.
Each side got the chance to try and influence the judge's decision on sentencing, as there were no set parameters for what Tina Peters could face for her guilty charges. But those who spoke in defense of Peters were met with a judge who was quick to fact-check their claims.
Election officials are understandably concerned because the public...
Dr. Frank, you're suggesting that we're here today because of what the Secretary of State did?
Yes.
And not because Ms. Peters took the video in the first place and gave it to someone who then put it on the internet? That's your suggestion? You can go on. I don't need an answer.
The prosecution focused their interviews on the damage, both tangible and intangible, that Peters did not only to Mesa County, but the country too, spreading distrust in a proven, functioning election system.
The only positive outcome of Tina's unlawful actions is one she didn't intend. Her actions awaken the network of individuals, these men and women across the country charged with protecting elections, to the real and present danger of insider threats.
Peters spoke for the first time in court as well, saying she was too weak to go to prison, and probation fit her crimes much better, crimes which she still did not condemn.
I don't know if you've ever seen as clean a past as I have, or present. But I did not do it. I did not do it, Your Honor, to disrespect the court or the law.
The judge gave her 9 years total behind bars, saying she was a privileged person who would do it all over again given the chance. And her denial of her wrongdoings only shows the dangerous precedent she sets.
This thought process, unfortunately, seems to consume so many in our country, regardless of race, gender, political affiliation, or the like, that what it is we hear and think can't possibly be wrong.
To sum it up, he had no mercy.
You abused your position, and you're a charlatan who used and is still using your prior position in office to peddle a snake oil that's been proven to be junk time and time again. In your world, it's all about you.
So, Mike, do you think this sentence of 9 years will deter others who might be tempted to follow in Peters' footsteps?
I think it could. I mean, 9 years is a lot. I was surprised by the length of it, but I was also surprised by the community that came forth that said they were affected by it. Former Congressman Scott McGinnis, who's on the Mesa County Commission, said how it affected people impacting their lives and the money they had to spend, and that was pretty poignant. And the judge just calling her a charlatan. I mean that just basically brought it down to that's the bottom line. And I think people will be frightful of it. And I think while this wasn't an election denial type trial per se, because she tampered with election equipment. I mean, people like the former president, I think, should be fearful that somebody can come down on them pretty hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Dick, Peters supporters, of course, now calling for retribution against the judge. Clearly won't deter them. I just begin to think, what's it take,
Right. Well, a message needed to be sent to election officials across the nation that this will not be tolerated. And that judge is fantastic. He did that. I don't understand this defiance in her. She was trashing the judge as recently as last week. I mean, but these people who believe in the stolen election conspiracies, they to their core they believe it, and this will not deter them. In fact, she will become a martyr to these folks. And so now I think it will have an effect on people doing what she did again, but it will not stem the stolen election conspiracies. In fact, it will probably encourage them.
Interesting. The judge did say, though, you are no hero. You know, it's
Good
one of
for
the
him.
things that
Yes.
he said.
Yeah.
Well, a little over a week before ballots hit the mail, a newly released poll finds the race in Colorado's Congressional District 8 is a toss-up. The poll by Emerson College shows Democratic incumbent Yadira Caraveo and Republican Gabe Evans are tied with 44% each. 12% are undecided. This race could decide which party controls the U.S. House. So Dick Evans he's received some help from the Congressional Leadership Fund. But this is one of the most competitive races in the country. So really, you would expect the National Party to put more money into it, and they're not at this point. Republicans do have a big fundraising gap, though. And in Pennsylvania, where voting has started, we're seeing more Democrats request those early ballots than Republicans. So how much of a disadvantage is Evans at here when it comes to enthusiasm and funding?
Oh, I think enthusiasm-wise, I think he's in good shape. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for here on his base. And that poll shows he's like 2.2% ahead, which is nothing. But it's going to go to the wire. The Congressional Committee is also spending money now in the 3rd District for Jeff Hurd.
Interesting.
So I just read that before we started our show. And but I think that both sides are going to have enough money to do what they need to do. You don't need to outspend the other guy if you got enough money to do what you need to do. I was outspent several times in the campaigns I ran, so I understand that. But this is just going to come down to a handful of votes. It just is. And that's all there is to it.
Yeah, no question. You know, Mike, you thought the Libertarian candidate in 2022 helped Caraveo eke out a win. This year, that Libertarian dropped out. We've talked about that and put his support behind Evans. Caraveo is getting more help from the National Party than Evans is, but really not as much as you might expect, I think. And since we're not a swing state, you don't see Harris coming here and that enthusiasm following her. So is this an even tougher race, do you think, than Democrats thought it might be? And we always knew it'd be competitive.
I think it's turned into a tougher race, but a few things at play. In 2 years ago, you know, it was supposed to be a race that played against the president, the Democrats, and it helped that the Libertarian was on the ballot. You know, this year, the Democrats have a pretty good enthusiasm ranking right now. I mean, they, you know, compared
Since Harris got into the race, for sure.
And so because of that, you know, Dick's talked about what Harris might win in this state, between 10 and 15%. The higher percentage she beats Trump by, the better chance Caraveo has of winning. And I'm really going to key off really, you know, how well Harris, you know, does statewide. I think will help her claim victory eventually. It might not be on election night because I think it'll be very close as the polls show.
Yeah.
So, Dick, attack ads are really picking up in this race, and Democrats are going after Evans on abortion, even though it's not one of the top issues. I think why?
Well, because they think that's always the silver bullet, and they've thought that for generations. But it just shows that I think some of the desperation, I think it is a closer race than Democrats thought it would be. And they always trot out the old abortion issue. And they're even bringing up that letter from when he was 17 years old on gay marriage. I mean, give me a break.
Back in 2004.
Yes. So, but we saw, you know, Democrats suffered badly in 2014 when Mark Udall was dubbed Mark Uterus because that's all he played was the abortion card. They've got to be careful they don't do that now.
Right. Mike, Republicans are running an ad where I talk about a vote that Caraveo took 5 years ago in the state legislature to lower the penalty for fentanyl, which she did and most Democrats did at that time 5 years ago. What they leave out is the part where I talk about how she voted for the Stop Fentanyl Act in Congress recently. I wonder if Republicans are overplaying their hand when it comes to crime and border security, when cost of living really is top of mind for voters.
Well, all the issue polls certainly show that immigration, border security, drugs coming across the border favor Republicans. And I think, like Democrats who are playing the abortion rights issue, they're going to their respective corners, coming out with their strengths and battling it out to the end. And ballots drop about, they're supposed to go out a week from today,
yeah.
and so they've got everything that they can throw at the voters right now, hoping it sticks. I mean,
everything but the kitchen sink.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they might throw the kitchen sink if they thought it would get an extra vote or two, right?
All right, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching Left, Right, Center. We'll see you next time.